04:47 a.m., Eagle Pass, Texas. 12 vehicles killed their headlights simultaneously on Ranch Road 1021, 300 meters from the front gate of Casa Esperanza del Norte. 31 children were still asleep inside. 0. Zero Hook, the FBI SWAT team from San Antonio, had been staged since 2 a.m. 12 operators, full tactical load, stacked in 3 elements. HSI Tactical held the eastern perimeter. Texas DPS troopers locked the service road. 3 gates, 3 simultaneous breach points. The compound covered 47 acres of Maverick County scrubland. A hand-painted Virgin of Guadalupe marked the front entrance. Below it, a sign in blue letters, Niños bajo protección, children under protection. The sign was accurate in the worst possible way. At 04:47 and 30 seconds, the breach commander gave the signal. Flashbangs detonated in the main house. K9 units hit the container dormitory at the rear of the property. In the front office, a man with 3 aliases and a history stretching back to a defrocked seminary in Monterey reached for an encrypted phone. He didn't get there. 18 minutes later, 31 children were carried out in emergency blankets. Retention count point, 0. 30 resolution Ts. This is the story of how a fake Catholic orphanage ran for 8 months on the Texas border inside a jurisdiction with one of the highest federal law enforcement concentrations in the country, collecting donor checks and a bishop's photograph, while moving children toward buyers in 3 American cities. And it is the story of a single CBP K9 handler who noticed a Ford F-350 making its 4th return crossing in 11 days and asked one question that started everything. The compound survived because it looked exactly like what it claimed to be. Casa Esperanza del Norte filed its nonprofit registration with the state of Texas in July 2025. Category: Humanitarian relief for unaccompanied minors at the border. Registered agent: a San Antonio attorney whose office handled a dozen similar filings per month. On paper, everything checked out. The Facebook advertising campaign launched in August 2025. Spanish-language ads targeted users in Central America and Mexico, positioned as legitimate migrant family services. The copy read warm and institutional, safe housing, educational programming, coordination with Catholic charities. The homepage showed classrooms, vegetable gardens, children and matching blue shirts. There was a photograph of a bishop blessing the facility at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The bishop, contacted 8 months later by federal agents, would state he had no recollection of visiting the property. 2 fundraising galas followed, one in San Antonio, one in Houston. Invitations went to immigration attorneys, civic organizations, and minor local officials. Attendance was modest but legitimate-looking. The compound raised $84,000 in direct donations, deposited into a Wells Fargo account registered to the nonprofit. What the donors saw was the front office building, a converted ranch house with painted murals, Spanish reading materials, and a reception desk staffed by 2 women who spoke fluent, reassuring English to any visitors. What the donors did not see was the back acreage. 3 converted shipping containers had been welded together on a concrete pad 200 meters behind the main house. A dirt track connected them to the property's eastern service entrance. The containers were fitted with reinforced interior walls, ventilation, and approximately 40 mattresses. The mattresses were secured to the floor with galvanized chain loops bolted through the steel base. At the entrance to the container dormitory, a commercial freight scale was mounted into the doorframe. Children were weighed on entry. The scale logged to a tablet. The tablet synced to an encrypted messaging application. In a ledger recovered later from a converted confessional booth in the main house, children appeared not by name but by a numeric code, weight, age bracket, and a destination column. The ledger used Spanish ecclesiastical formatting. Column headers read like baptism record fields. Agents who processed the ledger described it as one of the more methodical trafficking inventory systems they had encountered. There were 47 entries in the destination column matching addresses across 9 states. 31 of those entries were still present in the compound on the morning of June 4, 2026. Borrower retention point 4. Stakes bend. The investigation did not begin with a tip of wiretap or an informant. It began with a dog. On March 18, 2026, a CBP K9 handler named for purposes of this record only as Agent D was working a routine secondary inspection lane at the Eagle Pass International Bridge. A dark blue Ford F-350 Super Duty pulled into secondary. The driver presented a Texas commercial license and a customs manifest listing, church supplies, canned goods, printed materials, altar cloths. The K9 indicated on the rear cargo area. The vehicle was searched. Nothing was found except the declared items, packed in cardboard boxes with religious printing. The driver was cleared and released. Before releasing the vehicle, Agent D entered a notation into the checkpoint system. Same plate, same driver, third appearance and secondary within the past 10 days. Always southbound empty. Always northbound with church supplies. On March 29th, 11 days later, the same plate appeared for a fourth time. Agent D flagged the vehicle to HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, Eagle Pass. The flag was not an accusation. It was a pattern notation. 4 border returns in 11 days, no commercial logistics justification, consistent manifest narrative. The hit rate on vehicles matching that pattern in the Eagle Pass sector, based on prior interdiction data, ran at approximately 22% for contraband of some kind. HSI opened a preliminary inquiry. The vehicle registration traced to a limited liability company in Laredo. The LLC had 2 associated entities, one of which shared a registered agent address with Casa Esperanza del Norte. The inquiry became a case. 90 days of surveillance followed. HSI obtained pen register orders covering the phones associated with Casa Esperanza. Pole cameras were installed on the access road leading to the compound, capturing vehicle traffic without requiring entry onto private property. License plate reader data from state DPS was cross-referenced with checkpoint logs. In the first 30 days, the cameras documented 42 vehicle visits to the compound. 11 involved vehicles with prior contact in federal law enforcement databases. 3 of those 11 carried markers from an open HSI trafficking case in Houston. That cross-reference triggered a formal joint investigation between the HSI Eagle Pass office and the HSI Houston office. The case moved to a second phase. One detail kept nagging at the investigative team as they processed the surveillance data. The enrollment roster filed by Casa Esperanza del Norte with the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services listed 22 children in residence as of February 2026. But the poll cameras told a different story. Bed deliveries in January had involved 2 separate truckloads. The grocery runs coming into the compound averaged 3 to 4 times what 22 children would require. The numbers couldn't be reconciled on paper. Microphone final 5-min mark. The case needed someone inside. That decision was made in April 2026. An HSI special agent with prior undercover experience in humanitarian sector operations applied through a volunteer placement organization for a Spanish tutoring position at Casa Esperanza del Norte. She submitted credentials identifying her as a freelance ESL instructor with prior work at a Brownsville migrant shelter. The application was processed by the compound's front office within 2 weeks. She was invited for an orientation visit. She went inside on April 14, 2026. Her assignment in the front building covered the mornings. Literacy sessions with a group of children presented to her as the facility's youngest residents. She was given access to the reception area, the main classroom, and the garden. She was not given access to the rear of the property. The perimeter fence separating the front acreage from the back was explained as a maintenance area. Over 14 days, she counted children during morning sessions. Cross-referencing attendance patterns, she documented between 33 and 37 children in the compound across her rotation schedule. The state-filed roster listed 22. She also documented the shipping manifest system. Twice during her placement, a commercial vehicle arrived at the compound's rear service entrance in the early evening. Both times, the front office staff became briefly unavailable. Both times, children were moved from the rear dormitory area toward the service entrance, and then returned after approximately 45 minutes. The agent couldn't observe the service entrance directly, but she could count. The population count dropped by 4 to 6 children during those windows and returned to baseline afterward. On day 14, she notified her handler. The roster discrepancy and the movement windows were enough. What's most surprising about this case isn't the scale of the operation. It's how long it ran in plain sight with a legitimate nonprofit filing, a functioning website, and photographs of a bishop who never actually visited, while federal cameras watched the front gate and nobody looked behind the fence. The decision to move to a tactical operation went to the federal district level in late May 2026. The Joint Task Force brought in FBI San Antonio for SWAT capability. HSI Tactical held perimeter. Texas DPS provided ground support and jurisdiction coverage. The operational planning phase ran 3 weeks. Retention Chachkant Point. 50% mid-roll hook. Here's the part that should have been impossible. The compound had been operating within 40 miles of one of the busiest border crossing points in the United States. The Eagle Pass port of entry processed over 3 million northbound crossings in 2025. CBP, HSI, FBI, DEA, and Texas DPS all maintained active presences within a 40-mile radius. The compound filed paperwork with a state agency. It ran Facebook ads. We'll say what most won't. 8 months of uninterrupted operation means the front was very good, or that institutional attention was pointed the wrong direction, or both. Probably both. The surveillance photographs from the 90-day operation were clear. The ledger would later be described by the prosecuting U.S. attorney as organized, methodical, and damning, but none of that came until after June 4th. Put yourself in the position of the operational command team at 11 p.m. on June 3rd, 2026. 31 children are documented inside a compound. You have 3 gates. You have a main house with unknown occupants. You have a container dormitory at the rear that your undercover agent never directly accessed. You have a service entrance that had been used for movement at night. You don't have an interior floor plan of the containers. You don't know exact staffing numbers on site overnight. The breach had to be clean, fast, and simultaneous. One gate compromised early, and the others might trigger a response before teams were in position. The obstacle that nearly altered the timeline came at 11:48 p.m. A DPS unit staged on the service road reported a vehicle departing the compound through the rear gate, a white Dodge Ram with Coahuila plates that had not appeared in prior surveillance photography. The operational command made the call to let it proceed and track rather than intercept. Intercepting it would alert the compound. The vehicle was followed by a DPS unit to a motel in Eagle Pass, where it parked and the driver did not emerge. The breach timeline held. At 04:00 a.m., the teams moved into final staging positions. The FBI SWAT element, designated Entry 1, covered the main house front entrance and secondary side door. Entry 2, HSI Tactical, covered the rear container dormitory. Entry 3, a mixed DPS and HSI element, held the service gate and covered the eastern fence line. A medical team with pediatric capability staged on Ranch Road 1021 with 3 ambulances and 5 emergency blanket kits. Radio discipline was complete. No unnecessary transmissions. The compound's lights were on a timer. At 04:05, the front gate lights switched off on schedule as they had done every night captured on the pole cameras. At 04:47, the breach commander gave the signal. Entry 1 hit the main house front door simultaneously with a flashbang deployment through the front window. 3 seconds. The door frame gave on the second ram strike. The interior had a living area and a hallway. 2 adult males were present in the living area. Both were secured within 90 seconds. A third adult, later identified as the compound's director of operations operating under the name Fernando Acosta, one of 3 known aliases, was located in the back office reaching toward a desk where an encrypted Android phone was charging. He was taken to the floor before he reached it. He did not reach it. Entry 2 reached the container dormitory in parallel. The K9 team went first. The container doors were secured with external padlock systems, not locked from the interior. The K9 handler cut the first padlock. The interior of the first container held 16 children across 4 mattress platforms. Children aged approximately 4 to 12. The overhead light was a single fluorescent strip. Some children were awake, some were not. There is a line in the initial entry report that reads almost like a different kind of document entirely. It notes, matter-of-factly, that agents found a freight scale bolted to the doorframe of Container 1, serial number partially obscured with black paint, and that the scale was still powered on. The K9 team cleared 3 container sections. Entry 2's medical support element began moving children to the staging point at the front of the compound. Blankets from the ambulance kits. The children were counted at the front gate as they passed through. 15, 20, 26, 31. Microfinal 1012 min mark. The last child was carried through the main gate at 05:05 a.m., 18 minutes after the breach. The director's encrypted phone was seized intact, unwiped. The desk also contained a burner phone and a notepad with a list of contact names, organized by city: Houston, Atlanta, Memphis. 3 names per city. 8 names were circled. Agents would later determine that the circled names represented pending transfer arrangements. The confessional booth in the main house, which the undercover agent had photographed during her placement as a decorative artifact, was opened by agents during the post-breach search. Inside, $1.4 million in banded U.S. currency, vacuum-sealed in 5-gallon contractor bags, mixed denominations, no serial number sequences, no bank bans. 2 ledgers in Spanish were recovered from a false panel behind a cabinet in the director's office. The ledgers used ecclesiastical column formatting, baptism record headers. Inside, coded entries corresponding to children, transfer windows, vehicle identifiers, and destination entries. The destination entries matched the contact list from the desk notepad. The list of 47 sponsor families across 9 states was found as a printed document inside a manila folder labeled in Spanish, Familias Confirmadas, confirmed families. Federal warrants for that list were executed within 72 hours in 5 states simultaneously. What do you think? Did the system that let this operate for 8 months fail the 31 children inside, or was this a failure of a different kind entirely? That question is worth sitting with. The man operating as Fernando Acosta had 2 prior identities in federal databases. One linked to an asylum application filed and withdrawn in 2019. One linked to a dismissed trafficking inquiry in Loretto in 2022. The connection between the 3 identities had not been consolidated in the federal system. The dismissed 2022 case had closed without prosecution due to insufficient physical evidence. The asylum application had generated no follow-up after withdrawal. The seminary records establishing his defrocking were from a diocese in Nuevo, Leon. The diocese confirmed the defrocking through official channels after the June 4th arrest. They provided the date, October 2017. The reasons cited in the diocesan file, conduct unbecoming, specific, sealed. The bishop whose photograph appeared on the Casa Esperanza homepage was contacted by federal investigators on June 5th. His communications office issued a statement saying the bishop had no record of visiting the facility, and that the photograph appeared to have been taken at a different event and cropped into the website header without authorization. The statement did not address how the photograph had circulated or who had obtained it. As of the date of this account, the bishop has not made himself available for further comment. Retention, conch point. Last 60s, the driver of the white Dodge Ram that departed the compound at 11:48 p.m. was taken into custody at the Eagle Pass Motel at 6:30 a.m. on June 4th. His phone contained communications referencing a scheduled pickup that had not occurred. The communications went back 48 hours. The pickup had been scheduled for June 5th. 4 children, ages 6 through 9, a vehicle with Texas plates, destination Houston. The arrest closed that transfer before it could be rescheduled. That is what a 48-hour window looked like. Of the 47 confirmed families on the Familias Confirmadas list, 31 were located and identified through federal warrants executed by June 12th. 16 remain under active investigation. 3 subjects on the list had already moved residences since the list was compiled. They have not been located. The $4 million recovered from the confessional booth was identified as proceeds, not operational funds. Agents assessed that significantly more cash had moved through the compound over its 8-month operation. A financial forensics team is working backward through the nonprofit's bank records, the LLC structure in Laredo, and a second LLC with a registered address in Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas, that shared a beneficial ownership structure with the Casa Esperanza entity. The full financial picture is not yet resolved. Will this network be fully dismantled, or are there branches that won't surface for another decade? Comment yes or no. We read them all. The 31 children recovered on June 4th were transferred to federal protective custody. Their placement process involves coordination with DCFS, HHS, and consular offices for 3 countries. As of this account, 23 have been placed in temporary protective arrangements. 8 remain in federal custody pending identification of family contacts or country of origin determination. Identification of all 31 has been completed. None were on the state enrollment roster filed by the compound. The compound's nonprofit registration with the Texas Secretary of State was suspended on June 5, 2026, the day after the breach. The Wells Fargo account holding donor funds was frozen by federal order on the same date. The $84,000 in donated funds is currently subject to forfeiture proceedings. The fundraising galas are documented in catering records, event photography, and the nonprofit's own donor acknowledgement letters. Those letters went out on Casa Esperanza letterhead. Several recipients have contacted HSI voluntarily after the story became public. Several have not. One detail that stuck: the freight scale at the dormitory entrance was still powered on when entry 2 breached the container. It was logging. The last entry in the tablet sync was timestamped at 11:31 p.m. on June 3rd, 8 hours before the breach. Whatever it had weighed at 11:31 p.m. was still in the compound when the teams went in. The network is dismantled. The demand that created it is not. The 47 families on the list represent a demand structure that preceded Casa Esperanza and will outlast its prosecution. 3 subjects remain unlocated. The financial forensics are ongoing. The Nuevo Laredo LLC has not been fully mapped. If you've been watching this channel for cases that don't end clean, subscribe. The next one we're covering doesn't end any cleaner than this one.